Well, you've completed part 1. Let's move on to part 2. In part 2, we're going to start to talk about the interface between you and the computer. In this case, of course, we're going to be using Excel, but I thought I'd take a little trip back in time to say, well, Excel is a program that's become extremely popular, and most people simply think spreadsheet, that means Excel, but the original spreadsheet program that was popular was a program called VisiCalc. It was invented in the 1980s. It ran in no color, no graphics, no proportional font, and its memory was limited to about 64,000 spaces. It was extremely compact. All of you are used to megs and if not gigs that are on your iPod, but personal computers back then were very small and had to work in such a small space. But you can see all of the common things that we would use today. The numbers, the columns, the rows were in the original VisiCalc. The jargon we use to describe this section is that we talk about the user interface. It's a very commonly used term, the user being you or anybody who's using the computer, and the interface is the point of interaction. It's where the computer and you interact so that the computer can get input from you or display its output. To use a computer, you have to run a computer program. That's how it asks for the input and output. Today we call a computer program an app, short for computer application, which is just another word for computer program. So all of you people who have iPods and smartphones and all of those kinds of new toys, you always say, well, I got an app to do that. Well, an app means a computer application or a computer program. The study of how you and computers interact is a field called HCI, and it's a heavily researched area. The next slide shows you the basic idea that here's a computer over here, and you write a computer program that basically says, okay, we want to interact with the user, we want to ask for input or output, and you use various kinds of devices today. You use screens, you use mice, you use cameras, microphones, tablets, pens, printers, 3D vision goggles, and guitars. Vast number of things that are the interfaces today. And the interfaces are just everywhere. Here on an iPhone, an iTouch, and this is the new Apple iPad, this is the Kindle, this is a BlackBerry, and this is a bad representation of a Mac interface. This idea of interacting with a computer was studied in the 1980s, and the proposal was to come up with a way that would be common on most machines so that you would have an ease of learning what the machine could do for you. And the researchers came up with the idea of the WIMP interface, WIMP meaning Windows, icons, menus, and pointing devices. And you're used to that today. You're used to having a pointing device like a mouse. You're used to the icons on the screen or the concept of a window or menus or options that you simply click on. This original work was done at Xerox and at their research facility in California. Here's a picture of that original machine. Both the Windows and Mac machine borrowed all of this work from Xerox, so when anybody says how great either of the two interfaces are or make statements about that, the reality is that both of them stole this work from Xerox. Unfortunately, Xerox isn't around today in terms of a computer. It wasn't successful, but the follow-ons were very successful. So so the basic idea of a WIMP is that it has these general characteristics. Later on, because graphics displays are so heavily involved with having a WIMP interface, people will just say your GUI interface, GUI meaning graphical user interface. And you can read a history about this online in Wiki. And we just simply today think that it's obvious that we should have had LCDs and CRTs and screens that are colorful and so on. But that is not the case. I want you to view a couple of videos on emerging research on interfaces so that you understand that in your lifetime, and maybe even a short time from now, we possibly will see other kinds of interfaces with computers. And these two lectures being given at a West Coast think tank are really exciting and tell you where we might be taking things. So at this point this video will end. You'll be able to come back to part 3 in a few minutes. If you can't click on these links, then simply go to Laulima and I put the links there and you can click on them from that point.